Today it's time to look at some more games that are old and still look good today. Bad graphics doesn't mean bad games, but it is fun to take a look at certain graphical aspects of older games that are still noteworthy today. The definition of old in this series has always been 10 years, which isn't actually old, but it allows the videos to have a bit more variety. We've got a selection of games to talk about today, so let's get into it. 13. This game came out for a variety of systems, but it was the PC version that I played. When I was in high school, I borrowed 13 from a friend of mine. Since I didn't have a Nintendo console back in the early to mid-2000s, I didn't get a chance to play the Wind Waker yet. So 13 was the first cel-shaded game I've ever played. It's a first-person shooter with stealth elements that came out in 2003. It's got a comic book style that looks great. Headshots have an action sequence, and you see the sound effects spelled out. It does make me wonder if 13 was at least somewhat an influence on Valkyria Chronicles. I've always liked cel shading. Back in the earlier days of 3D, imperfections were really obvious. Blurry textures and low polygon models. You know how it is. Well, you don't really have that as much with cel-shaded art styles. But it's not just a band-aid. I think current technology allows developers to further improve on cel-shaded games. And it would be nice to see some more games that utilize this sort of style. If you look back at the game now, it is obvious that certain things aren't exactly that great, like you do see low polygon models, but nevertheless, it's still a good-looking game. Gen 4 Pokemon games. Technically, it's more than one game, but who cares? For the longest time, the dream for a lot of people in my generation was to have a mainline 3D Pokemon game. Ooh, could you imagine what that would look like? Fancy stuff. While Game Freak did get there eventually, I do really like the 2D games. Gen 3 was the last of the true 2D games, and features graphics that look exactly like you'd expect a 16-bit JRPG to look like, which I think is really cool. But Gen 4 graphics are, in my opinion, a little bit more unique. While technically being 3D games, Gen 4 looks more like augmented 2D. I guess you could call it 2.5D, but a lot of times, those games are very clearly 3D in look, but 2D in gameplay. Gen 4 games manage to look 2D, but includes some 3D flair with the environments. It's especially noticeable with buildings and trees and, other environmental bits. It allows for a much better sense of vertical scale compared to previous games. I don't know how to describe it exactly, but the fact that the games still retain a pixel art look is what does it for me. I wish I was a bit more appreciative of the look of these games back then, but hey, I guess I just didn't see things that way. Muramasa. Something I always like to do is talk about vanillaware games. And one of the reasons is their use of 2D graphics. It's a 2D hack-and-slash game. The environments look beautiful and are supposed to resemble old Japanese art. It's a really interesting representation of Edo period Japan. The animation is fluid, the effects look great. It's just one of the most gorgeous games I can think of. It originally came out for the Wii, but there is a Vita, remaster or remake, whichever one it is again. So if you want something that's a little bit more HD looking, then perhaps you want to take a look at that. Unfortunately, 2D games sometimes get unfairly criticized and seen as low-effort creations, which I think is really too bad. Perhaps because many younger gamers associate 2D games with mobile games, maybe? I don't know, it's a theory. But I think you'll be hard-pressed to find someone who thinks vanillaware games look ugly or low-effort. Driver 1 and 2. Again, this is more than one game, but they're so similar, so it makes sense to talk about them both. Driver 1 and 2 are great games. In fact, they're some of my favorite games ever. Driver 1 is a PS1 and PC game, while Driver 2 is only a PS1 game. I think a lot of arcade-style driving games feature too much over-the-top nonsense. Exaggerated car speeds and abilities, ridiculous visual effects, and worst of all, just bad driving physics. It just does not look believable at all. If you like those games, that's cool, but it's definitely not for me. Driver 1 and 2, on the other hand, are perfect for me. Handling is based on realism, which makes things challenging and exciting, yet it's arcade enough that you don't have to worry about certain details. For example, boxes, cones, and parking meters, and also other things that might damage a car in real life, are a non-issue in this game. In terms of the visuals, there's actually a lot that I'm not really a fan of. Even when the PS1 was new, I thought a lot of the games on that system didn't look that great. So why are we even talking about these games in this video then? Because the way the cars look when they drive is really realistic. The body roll, how the suspension bounces before it settles, and how the cars slide look just like those old car chase movies from the 70s. It looks so cool, and obviously that was purposefully engineered into the game. I love the fact that you can make your own chase movies out of the replays. It's quite a thrill to try and outrun the police for as long as possible, while trying to make your driving look as cool as possible, and keeping damage to a minimum. I used to put so much effort into making everything look as realistic as possible. Driver San Francisco is nowhere near as fun as those two games, in my opinion. The way the car movements look is what it's all about with those games. The last game on this list is something I don't really hear people talking about. It's Risen by Piranha Bytes. The developer is quite known for having created the Gothic series in the early 2000s. Gothic 3 was seen as a bit of a low point in the series there. The word unfinished is one that gets thrown around a lot. When Risen was released in 2009 for PC and the Xbox 360, it was considered a return to form. Risen is an action RPG. It's a sandbox-style game, and you get various dialogue choices that affect gameplay. I'm sure that sounds familiar, maybe a bit like The Witcher 3, but back in 2009, The Witcher 2 wasn't even out. I was on a real RPG roll during that time. Oblivion was my free roam RPG of choice. The Witcher had a lot of atmosphere and felt really immersive. Dragon Age Origins was more strategic. Fable 2 really shows you how your choices affect the world. And Risen had a bunch of elements I liked from those other games rolled into one. The game doesn't look perfect, of course, and neither does it look that impressive compared to many of the modern offerings. But considering its age, Risen doesn't have anything about it that is really jarringly offensive to the eyeballs. Except maybe for the character animations. They don't always look that good. There's atmosphere with the lighting and the day and night cycles. Foliage moves in the wind. It just has a look about it that makes towns feel lived in rather than just a collection of similar buildings plonked down on an area that's been cleared out. I haven't even thought about this game in a while, so it's been interesting to experience it again. Perhaps one of the reasons that the series slipped my mind is that Risen 2 and 3 were not seen as improvements, which made the series fall away from public consciousness. For a lot of people, The Witcher 3 fulfills the wants of people who like or might have liked Risen, though they are different games. There are just a lot of things that I think have some similarities. So, those are 5 games that are 10 years or older that I think look great today. I really made an effort to approach the subject of graphics from a different angle, so I hope that comes across as you're watching. Other than Crysis, let me know what old games you think look great, whether it's overall presentation, advanced shading techniques for the time, or even just cool menus. As always, thank you to all the Patreon members who help the channel. This platform has its moments, let's say, and your help really removes some worries that have been floating around in my mind lately due to all the shenanigans that can occur. Another way to help out is to get merch from the YSN store. Thank you to everyone who has bought from there. It's cool to think that there are people running around with the logo of this channel on a shirt. Can you believe that? Check the description for all the links. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you again in the next video.